Code Ninja Security Advisory. Listen up. We're bypassing all the usual pleasantries today because we need to issue an immediate, critical alert. If you're operating a shared hosting environment right now, your perimeter is under active threat. We are tracking a highly severe privilege escalation flaw. It's CVE 2026-54420, and it is literally burning down hosting providers as we speak. Consider this explainer your tactical briefing. You are officially on borrowed time, and an unpatched server right now carries an estimated liability of up to $5 million. Let's get right into the intelligence.
Okay, here's our advisory manifest for this briefing. We'll break down the 0-day, run a quick comms check, map out the blast radius, deploy the protocol for immediate mitigation, and then wrap up with our ethics and sign-off. Our strict threat intelligence briefing protocol dictates that this disclosure is all about giving you actionable mitigation directives right now and forcing vendor patches across the industry. We absolutely do not have time to waste.
Section 1. The 0-day. We are looking at the active exploitation of CVE 2026-54420. This is a severe privilege escalation vulnerability sitting right inside the LiteSpeed, cPanel, and WHM plugins. And here's the kicker. This isn't just theoretical. It's not some lab experiment. Threat actors are actively exploiting this in the wild right now to hijack shared hosting servers.
To really grasp the urgency here, just follow the timeline. Active exploitation started back in May of 2026. Then, on June 14th, MITRE published the official CVE record. Just a single day later, June 15th, CISA slammed this flaw onto their Known Exploited Vulnerabilities catalog. And let me be crystal clear about why a CISA Kev edition is a massive glowing red flag. When CISA drops a strict 48-hour patch mandate for federal agencies, it means weaponized, automated exploit chains are already out there. It means this thing is trivial to execute, and it's happening at scale. Now, federal agencies have until June 18th to comply, but private sector infrastructure, that's almost always the first to fall. Your infrastructure is on borrowed time. If you haven't patched by the 18th, you don't just have a vulnerability. At that point, you have to assume your host is entirely compromised, and attackers are already setting up persistence.
Moving on to Section 2, Comms Check. We just need to pause this briefing for 1 second to make sure our communication link is completely locked in for the rest of this download. Our secure comms established. As part of our mandatory operational check, I need you to subscribe to @cybertech79 and enable those notifications right now. Consider this an absolute security necessity so you don't miss these real-time intelligence drops. If you're receiving this intel loud and clear, hit that like button as a formal ACK, your acknowledgement of receipt. Awesome. Secure link confirmed. Let's move to the blast radius.
Section 3. Blast radius. We really need to unpack the technical reality of this flaw and the massive liability scale we're dealing with, because this isn't your standard run-of-the-mill bug. We are talking about full host compromise.
So this vulnerability carries a high-severity CVSS 3.1 base score of 8.5. But what does that number actually mean in business terms? Well, it's terrifying. A successful exploit hands an attacker root-level control of the entire shared server. That means every single website, every database, every customer account hosted on that machine is compromised all at once. For managed hosting providers, web agencies, this mass data exposure creates an estimated $500,000 to $5 million liability exposure per incident. How do we even get to a number that high? Well, factor in the regulatory fines. Factor in the cost of legally mandated breach disclosures to thousands of clients. Then add in the complete loss of customer trust and the churn that follows. And honestly, the most immediate pain? The sheer grueling labor hours of performing forensic analysis on a fully compromised root server where the attackers might have tampered with every single log file.
So what's actually happening under the hood? The root cause here is a CWE61 Symlink traversal flaw. Basically, the LiteSpeed plugins are improperly handling symbolic links. Now, think of a Symlink like a shortcut icon on your computer's desktop. It's just a file that points to another file or directory somewhere else. In a secure hosting environment, tools like Cloud Linux and CageFS exist to keep users securely locked inside their own little digital boxes. But this vulnerability lets an attacker craft a malicious shortcut that points directly into restricted, highly sensitive areas of the server. They effectively just step right over those isolation boundaries. By tricking the system into reading or writing files in privileged contexts, the attacker completely bypasses the walls meant to keep tenants totally separated.
Let's look at the actual affected software. If you're running the LiteSpeed cPanel plugin before version 2.4.8 or the WHM plugin before 5.3.2.0, you are exposed. And here's the absolute nightmare scenario that this setup enables. Picture this. You're a hosting provider. You've got a platinum tier client. Let's call them Tenant A. They pay top dollar for flawless security, hardened databases, the whole 9 yards. But on that exact same shared server, you have Tenant B, a legacy account, paying $2 a month, running a default password on an FTP account they forgot about 5 years ago. An attacker brute forces Tenant B's weak FTP login. Thanks to this LiteSpeed flaw, the attacker uses that low-privilege access to craft a Symlink payload, escalate their privileges to root, and break right out of CageFS. Suddenly, Tenant A's ultra-secure database is dumped and ransomed. It literally doesn't matter how locked down Tenant A was. Because Tenant B got compromised on a vulnerable server, your entire infrastructure falls like a house of cards. The walls just cease to exist.
All right, Section 4, the protocol. We are pivoting right now from diagnosing the threat to the mandatory eradication playbook. Action is required immediately. Here are your strict directives. Step 1, apply the vendor patches right now. Update that cPanel plugin to 2.4.8 or later, and the WHM plugin to 5.3.2.0. Step 2, audit the environment. You cannot just patch this and assume everything is fine. Your security engineers need to actively run scripts to hunt for unauthorized symlinks inside your CageFS configs. You're looking for anything newly created, any orphaned links, or suspicious shortcuts pointing outside of user directories, especially anything aiming at root or sensitive config files. And step 3, look, I know this is painful, but it is absolutely non-negotiable. Execute a mass credential rotation. Because root access might have been compromised before you applied the patch, you have to operate under the assumption that all your shadow files, password hashes, and access keys are gone. They've been dumped. You need to rotate all cPanel passwords, database passwords, and FTP credentials across every single tenant on that affected host.
Now, what if you literally cannot patch right this second for operational reasons, or maybe you're in the middle of staging a deployment? You have to deploy these emergency compensating controls to stop a root-level takeover. First, suspend FTP access for all untrusted accounts immediately. Just cut off their primary entry vector entirely. Next, disable PHP handler execution via the Cloud Linux lvectel command to stop any web shell execution. And this last point is crucial. Before you do anything else, preserve your memory images using gcore and lock down your access logs. Why is this so critical? Because applying a patch usually means rebooting your services. If you reboot, you flush the server's RAM, and doing that destroys the highly volatile forensic evidence you desperately need to figure out if threat actors are already inside your network. You need those memory dumps to see exactly what processes were running and what payloads were executing. If you're already compromised, blind patching will overwrite the exact evidence you need for incident response and your legally mandated disclosures. Secure your evidence first.
Finally, Section 5, Ethics and Sign-Off. We ground every single advisory in this series in the principles of coordinated vulnerability disclosure. Because protecting the perimeter, that's a collective, industry-wide responsibility. Users need to know to protect their systems. That is the core code we operate by, and it's exactly what justifies the aggressive disclosure of this intelligence today. We do not hide 0 days when they are actively burning down infrastructure. The community has to be mobilized, informed, and equipped to patch before that CISA deadline hits and liability starts cascading across the private sector. Keeping quiet, that only helps the adversaries.
So I'm going to leave you with this final, provocative check on your operational readiness. Will your perimeter actually hold against the June 18th mandate? Take a hard look, evaluate your exposure, run the eradication playbook, and lock down your shared hosts. This has been a Code Ninja Security Advisory. Stay secure.